9 o'clock. I call the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority meeting to order. And there are no items from the chairman. Are there any citizens to be heard? If not, are there approval of the minutes of the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority meeting of July 12th?
Move. Oh, second. I second Kay's motion.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Moving on to the consent docket. There are 6 items on the consent docket. Are there any that would like to be individually considered? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent docket?
I make the motion that we approve the consent docket.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, moving on to individual consideration items. Item A is consideration of the adoption of a resolution authorizing Cotpa trustees and staff to sign and act on behalf of the authority in administrative matters concerning the outstanding parking system revenue bonds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With the new bond sale that we just recently had, it's time for us to update the signature authorization record that the trustee bank maintains. Essentially what we have here are signatures that can sign for such things when we do fund transfers or when we're making payments from some of our bond accounts. So we have both the chairman and the vice chairman as board member signatories, and then we have 3 staff members, myself, Melissa, our finance manager, and then Debbie, who's our parking manager, also authorized to sign on these accounts.
Okay, is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move the item. Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Passes. Okay. Item B is consideration of approval of the change order number 1 to the contract with Pope Contracting Incorporated for site, mechanical, and electrical improvements at Union Station.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item covers some, number 1, there's actually 3 items on here. One of them deals with some waterproofing repairs we had to make. You might recall that when we closed the tunnels, the underground tunnels as a result of the I-40 relocation, we dug around our foundations and sealed up the building, and then we did some waterproofing. Well, we carried the waterproofing up to a level that then would have been covered by concrete when we poured our parking area behind the building. We're just now getting our parking area poured, and as a result of the flooding that occurred on the 31st, the water level actually got high enough that it got over the waterproofing level and got behind the waterproofing material, and so we had to come back in and treat that defect that was there so that we could be sure that our building was properly sealed. So that's item 1. As you might expect with a building that was built in 1931, as we were going through and doing the work that we're currently doing on trying to do some of our mechanical site improvements, we identified that we had a collapsed sewer line underneath the building, and so this covers the additional work that was necessary for that collapsed sewer line. And then we also, in trying to make sure that things flowed properly, we also had an issue where we had one of our sanitary sewer lines that had a considerable amount of debris in there, and we have had a plumbing service there to clear out that line. And then what we're doing is actually relining that particular drain line, but we had to get this material out of that line in order to be successful in being able to reline that so that we knew that we had a properly working sanitary sewer line. So adding these 3 items up in total comes to a total of $34,562, which is just a little bit over 4% of the total contract value. It does give us a new contract cost of $851,562. It also added 32 additional calendar days to the contract because of the work, particularly being able to remove that debris from the sanitary sewer line took quite a bit of time. And I do remind you that the majority of all of this work is being paid from our stimulus funds that we had. So we continue to push the contractor to make sure that we complete this project on time to give us ample time to get our reimbursements.
Well, it's good we have a contractor on contract when we have a 100-year reign to test it out. 500-year reign. It's good to test it out. Okay, is there approval of change order number 1?
Move approval. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay. Item C is consideration of approval of the change order number 1 on the contract with Flintco LLC for MB 1092, construction of the new parking garage located at 431 West Main Street.
Thank you. This item actually covers 5 items related to our new parking garage. Item number 1 is actually very similar to an issue that we had when the city center garages were built. This is primarily a cosmetic item, but it deals with the way that the stairwells, stair treads come together. Really, what this is a way to ensure that we eliminate any potential trip hazards at the stairwell. And again, this corrective measure is very similar to something we had to do when we did the city center garage. The second item, we had to relocate an AT&T pedestal off our site onto the sidewalk area, onto the public right-of-way. We had to remove some concrete obstructions. This is not the big obstruction that we were talking about that caused us to have to redesign our columns and our piers. This was a smaller concrete obstruction that we found on site that was more economical to just go ahead and get it out of our way. We also, as you know, when we had our sales agreement with Hightower, we agreed at our expense we would move their generator, which was located just to the west of their annex building, but essentially sits very close to where our northeast elevator tower would be located in the garage. And that was at a cost of $63,000 and change. And then finally, we had to relocate a sanitary sewer line that actually connects to the 100 North Walker building. We needed to move it. It came across our site in an area that would have been blocked with the development of the garage, and so we needed to move it to a more accessible area. So adding up these 5 items comes to a grand total of $95,787. This is a little less than just 0.5% of our total contract cost. So our new contract cost at this point is $20,766,000 and some change. Just as a reminder, we had about $21.7 million allocated to the cost of the garage, so we still have a little over $1 million of potential change orders remaining.
Will we see a change order in the near future on the pier?
Yes, we will. They still have to work that up. But the work has actually been done. We're now out of the ground, you might say, on all of our piers have been bored, and so now you're starting to see the columns going up.
So, Rick, do you recall on the construction of other garages, how many change orders? I mean, on a project this size, what could we anticipate?
We've been successful in the sense that generally we've stayed under that 10% number. At the City Center garage, we ran into some underground obstructions. We got a little bit of debris. There we ran into some asbestos pipe issues. Once we got up, we really didn't have too many, except we did have one of the most significant ones was a design error by the structural engineer that we had to go back in and make a significant change as a result of that. You know, the numbers I don't remember offhand as much as I just focus on the dollar amount, because that's where our threshold limit is important.
And so this one's a little under 0.5%.
Right.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve change order number 1 to the parking garage?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay. Item D is the approval of change order number 2 and number 3 to the contract with Diversified Construction of Oklahoma Incorporated for MB 1021, the Santa Fe parking garage renovation and improvements.
This covers our third parking garage activity that we've got going on right now. There are 2 change orders here. Change order number 2 deals with 2 items. One of them is removing the courtyard planter. If you remember that old courtyard area, there was a planter out there, had a fountain in that area. This covers that removal. Also, on the west side of the garage, there were brick pavers out by the elevator area, and then further south along our building where you might think of the breezeway that was there down there where formerly Trigen, now I can't even think of their name, Valera, is located. We're removing those pavers just because they become more of a nuisance. They're sitting in a sand base. They tend to want to move. We're just going to do an infill on those with concrete just so it's a cleaner, safer surface to walk across. That particular change order has a total value of $8,161, plus we are adding 14 days to the contract. Then on change order number 3, this was something we ran into when we were doing our structural steel installations. There were actually 3 accent panels that needed to be removed or relocated as a result of ensuring that we got proper connections with our structural steel. That cost is $3,049. So when you add both change order 2 and change order 3, it comes to a total cost of just a little over $11,000. Thus far, we've had just over 2% in terms of the total change orders that have been added to our original contract price. So our new price right now is $2.464 million. And our budget on this project, just as a reminder, was about $2.5 million. This was being paid from our cash balance that we have.
Okay. Any comments or questions? If not, is there a motion to approve the change orders number 2 and 3?
Yeah.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. Okay. Item number E is the ratification of the administrator's actions and approval of the request for proposals for a parking study and authorize the administrator to advertise and release the RFP.
Mr. Chairman, this item, and again, it is a ratification, it is an action that I've taken. We do have an RFP on the street right now, which is a parking study, but this one is really going to focus heavily on economic development issues. What we're taking a look at is the impact that these MAPS projects that we're bringing on board will have on parking demand in the downtown area, specifically looking in terms of the new convention center hotel, and then some other developments in that area, as well as the private development that potentially would take place on the sides of the new MAPS park. We are asking in this study to not only look at on-street but off-street parking as a package, because as we've said many times, there is a correlation. They need to work together in this case. Again, the intent here is to support not only the public development that we know of, but also the private development that we're hearing about or that potentially may take place. We also added to this requirement to do a financial modeling for potentially a parking district, just to see how that might be put together. Again, not that we have any intent to do that as much as we just like to have that information, so later on, when those kinds of things come to be considered, we've got some background support information to help in decision-making that may come later down the road. Since this is an RFP, we really don't know the total cost, but we have estimated the cost to do something like this at roughly $30,000.
Yeah, if I may, Rick, do you anticipate this study to look beyond just the central core part of downtown and maybe look at outlying areas as far as possible location of parking?
This one is actually going to focus more in the center core area of downtown. One of our previous studies, we actually did look north towards Midtown and certainly over to the Bricktown area. This one, because of the anticipated development, the recently announced development, and the hope of development around the park, we've really tried to contain this study area.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If not, is there a motion to ratify the administrator's actions?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Moving on to the claims, payroll and vendor claims. Is there a motion to ratify the claims through July 23rd, 2013? It's been moved.
Second.
And seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The financial reports. Rick?
Just emphasize to all board members, although this is a June statement, this is not an official final June statement. There'll still be a number of adjustments being made to these financial statements for our final year-ending report, which you will get later in the calendar year. Probably the biggest item under the revenue side is the nearly $2 million shortfall that currently shows under federal grants. As we complete, we actually have received some of this money. Over half of this money will be booked. Probably close to $1.7 million of this will be booked. The remaining $300,000 we actually may not draw, simply because as you look down to our expense category, our maintenance expenses haven't been as high as we anticipated, which is good. Then that means we don't get to draw as much in federal money. So when you see the final ending statement, there will be a negative balance on federal grants, but I assure you that we will get the majority of this money and it will be in our account. On the expense side, the contribution, we have seen, as we go back and we analyze this more specifically, the fact that we've been able to bring on new buses this year. We received several 2013 buses. Has really helped in terms of our expenses as it relates to making bus repairs. I've talked as we've gone through this fiscal year about our diesel fuel prices, since that can have a significant impact on our budget. I've been given the budget office credit, and the numbers that they picked as target numbers this year. After all was said and done, at least we think we have all the numbers in on it. It looks like we're going to come in about $20,000 under budget on fuel. So given the volume that we use, it's a phenomenally close number. And again, a lot of it has to do with the budget number, price per gallon, which is always a challenge.
We don't want to take credit for picking the gas prices, because we'd be expected to repeat that.
We'll see. Yeah. Under the parking side, again, it was it will be a good year for parking, solid occupancy. We purposely did not backfill that lease space when we had one of our tenants move out, because of the work that we're doing over there right now. It's much easier to go in there and deal with putting in the new fronts if we don't have to deal with tenants in the space. So that $62,000 shortfall was something we had anticipated and expected that our revenues would be sufficient to cover that shortfall that we have. We still anticipate some expenses under the other services and fees as a result. Again, I've mentioned many times that it's a timing issue on the receipt of the public invoices for their management and for the work that they do. We always tend to run a little bit in arrears on that. So again, those will be numbers that will be picked up when we do the final year-ending closeout. So the bottom line is, on parking, once again, we will finish the year in a positive balance, in a positive situation. And moving over to the river item here, we will have some more revenue coming in under the federal grant reimbursement, potentially as much as $30,000 that would be coming in. We do anticipate that we're going to have additional expenses, however, probably in the $40,000 range. You might recall 2 months ago, you gave us budget authorization to go ahead and spend more money this year. That was a result of advancing some of our expenses into this year so that we could spend our stimulus money, so that we could not only spend it but then get our reimbursement before the deadline hits, when the feds will no longer allow us to reimburse ourselves using stimulus funds. So that was a $75,000 additional allowance to the budget that you provided 2 months ago. So we will end up the year using some of our fund balance in the river operation, but we will still have a sufficient fund balance to cover ourselves. So the river operation will continue to be a challenge. You know the problems we had this year this prior fiscal year in terms of issues with the dam and their performance. And then as we started this new fiscal year, we again had some problems in July. Public Works has taken steps to bring on the equipment necessary to make those dam repairs so we have more reliable operation of those. That'll be significant. And one of the challenges that we have whenever we have an issue like that to remember is that we have to maintain a balance between what the FTA considers transit ridership versus non-transit ridership. And so when we're not able to do our normal transit runs, it does limit our ability to sell charters and special cruises, because we can't allow those to become a larger percentage of our business. Those are profitable for us. And so it does impact our revenue base when we're not able to run our transit service because it does limit what we can do on that specialty side. So that's it, Mr. Chairman, unless there's any other questions.
Are there any questions about the financial reports? And that's for the authority. Now, there is also a retirement fund financial report.
I don't have any major comments on that since we look at the detail on a month-by-month basis.
Okay. You've got the information in front of you. Are there any questions about either of the financial reports? If not, is there a motion to receive both of them?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Okay. Going on into program reports. Transit. Jason?
Okay, well, good morning. Thanks, Jeannie. Appreciate you getting that ready for me. Okay, well, I just want to say, thanks for the opportunity to share some highlights from our transit system report with you this morning. The data that's in your report is through June of 2013, which is, of course, the end of our fiscal year. And so I thought for the purposes of our discussion this morning, maybe we might want to just spend some time focusing on kind of looking at a year-to-year comparison. So the slides that I have are really going to try to focus on looking at FY13 versus FY12 to kind of give us a better idea of, how did we do year versus year in terms of comparisons there. And so with that, let me see if I have a little bit of problem here. There we go. With that, we'll go ahead and look at cumulative ridership. This is total ridership for the entire system. And if you look down in the bottom right-hand corner of your slides, you can see that in FY13, we finished with about 3.18 million riders. That compares to 3.19 million the previous year. So it's a difference of about 10,000. But when you start digging into the details and you look at the number of operating days that we actually had service on the street, we had 2 less operating days in FY13. And so with an average of about 10,000 passengers per day, you had a couple of more operating days in there. It's very likely that had we had that same number in 13 as we did 12, we would actually see an increase in ridership from a cumulative standpoint. So just wanted to kind of try to temper those numbers and give you a little bit more information behind those. And then, of course, the pie graph will kind of show where our ridership comes from. It's no surprise that fixed route is certainly the largest portion of our ridership. If you break those segments out in a little bit more detail, although cumulative ridership, again, was down a little bit, we did see increases on the fixed route side, and we saw increases in MetroLift. And then, of course, the services we provide to the elderly, our OU Medical Center passengers and MetroLink experienced some declines. With fixed route being such a large portion of our operations, the rest of the slides I have this morning are really going to concentrate on fixed route. And we've got a couple different ways that we can monitor ridership and look at it from year to year. And so I'll kind of try to talk through those with you real quickly. Again, looking at cumulative ridership for the fixed route, you can see that in 2013, as I mentioned, we actually saw an increase, about 10,000 riders over the previous year. And again, that's in light of 2 less operating days. The downtown discovery, which we've been talking about over the last couple of months, is a subset of that cumulative ridership on the fixed route, and that is the one area in fixed route that we saw a decline. I am happy to report, though, that in looking at the month-to-month comparison, and you can see this in your report and some of the line charts, we did begin to kind of narrow that gap in June in terms of ridership on the Discovery when you compare year over year. Another way that we look at passenger activity or passenger counts is looking at passengers per service hour. And in 2013, we saw a decline in our riders per hour, but I would remind everyone that we also enhanced some service on 4 routes last year. And so, of course, anytime we enhance service, that means we add hours to the system. And so, again, the caveat there when you're looking at those two numbers is just to be aware that we're really comparing different amounts of hours, and generally you can expect maybe a year, sometimes even 2 years, I'm learning, for that passenger activity to catch up. And then the last thing I'll talk about on the fixed route ridership is represented in that bar chart. That's looking at our average passengers per day. And again, going back and looking kind of at the year in total, with the red bars being our FY 12-13 fiscal year, you can see that in all but 3 months, we actually had higher average passenger counts per day, which I think is a good thing to note. In February, April, and May, you'll see that we did not exceed the current year or the previous year's total, but I will mention we had some bad weather days in some of those months. February, we had about 4 bad weather days. April, we had, I believe it was 6 bad weather days, and then in May, 9. And so, in fact, the last week of May was pretty bad for us in ridership. So overall, we did exceed last year's totals in 9 of the 12 months. And then I also wanted to kind of report back to you and give you kind of an idea of where we finished on the 3 routes that we added service to last year. If you recall, we increased the trips, which of course increases the frequency on 4 of the routes, routes 3, 10, 13, and 22. And so you can see, again, looking at the red bars, which represent FY13, you can see our average daily ridership for each of those routes that we enhanced service on did see an increase last year. And then lastly, just a real quick look at our miles between road calls. Just wanted to point out that we had 9 months where we exceeded our target of trying to achieve 13,000 miles between road calls. July and August, you can see we're below that target, and those were 2 very hot months, hot weather months, and of course anytime we have really hot weather, it obviously causes us more problems with our equipment. And then in December, we had about 27 major mechanical failures that also dropped us below our 13,000 miles between road call target. So that's kind of a snapshot of, again, of where we finished FY13 compared to FY12. I'll be happy to answer some questions there, or I can move on and give you a little bit of an update on some projects we're working on at South May.
Are there any questions?
Remind me where Route 22, that's the one we...
Route 22?
Yeah, where does that go?
That is...
I'll help you out on this one, Jason. It runs to the northeast part of our city. It goes up primarily MLK. It goes up towards the Cowboy Hall of Fame. It is the route that we'll be looking to take to the Oklahoma, or to the city-county health department. So it's essentially a northeast route. That's the easiest way to say it.
And what is the frequency on that route, do you know?
We've got 2 buses out there right now, so we're running, I think it's, now you're asking me a question I don't know.
30 minutes is the frequency on 22.
Thank you.
Just a possible comment with respect to the decline in the downtown discovery, that may be attributable to people trying to walk more, in the downtown area as opposed to a lack of interest in using it. I mean, I think it's perhaps a positive sign in some respects.
We're working with Michael from a marketing standpoint, too. One of the other assumptions that was made, and we're trying to check these things out, some of them are easier to do than others, but the fact that we moved from trolleys to a wrapped bus, the trolleys were more identifiable than this wrapped bus is, because this wrapped bus also does, on some days, provide service out on our normal fixed routes. And so we also were wondering whether that contributed to maybe the confusion, particularly visitors that come to town, trolleys being just by the nature of their design easier to identify. So that's something else we're looking at and seeing if there's a way that we can make it more visible or more obvious that this is a free service, because we know when we went from charging a quarter to having it underwritten that ridership jumped. And so, but you're right, as we make the downtown more walkable too, and particularly in nicer weather months, people are going to get out and walk.
How about wrapping it like a trolley?
We haven't considered that yet. I mean, those are ideas that we're just looking at. I mean, frankly, we thought we could just give it a different look and it would work, and I'm not sure that it hasn't. We just know ridership is down, and that's why we're trying to figure out. So that's something we'll take a look at as well.
And I'm not suggesting not to use this service, but, pretty much the whole month of July is up in Boston, and we would walk well over a mile a day back just one way. And so we were walking 2, 3, 4, 5 miles easily each day.
It's interesting that, and I'll, pick on myself. If I go to Washington, you just walk. I mean, you maybe catch the metro if you're going to go a long distance or something, but it's just the nature of people are out on the sidewalk and they're walking, and when lots of people are doing that, you're more inclined to do it.
Yes.
When there's not as many, maybe you don't think about it as much. So it's an interesting phenomenon, but you're right. It's just like people who travel to other cities who use public transit, and yet when they're here, they don't use it.
Yeah.
What are the headways for the Discovery line? Is it, are we 15?
15 minutes, yeah.
Okay.
All right, well, next thing I would like to do is just share a few pictures with you to give you kind of an idea, again, of some of the construction that's going on at South May. Last month, we talked a little bit about the reconstruction and rehabilitation we're doing with the concrete, particularly the joints where the concrete comes together, and we looked at some pictures of that. And I just wanted to kind of show this picture here to give you kind of an idea of the extent of the construction. You can see that's our main parking grid where we park our buses, and you can see a lot of it being coned off there and various trenches and so forth. So it is a very large project, and it is creating some logistical challenges, but I would like to acknowledge staff, both in operations and in maintenance, and for their work, kind of trying to get through this. Lots of communication back and forth, and our maintenance crew in particular is finding some creative places to park our buses, because it is getting a little bit crowded when you cone off this much of our parking lot. And then wanted to kind of give you an idea of the process for installing our light fixtures. Right now we have lighting around the perimeter of the facility, but we don't have a lot of lighting inside the parking lot. And so the lighting that we're doing is going to be inside the parking lot on some pretty substantial poles. I just want to kind of show that process. This rebar structure that you're looking at here is actually what they will set down in the ground, and I think it goes down about 50 feet into the ground there. And then here's just a picture of them dropping that into a sizable hole right outside our maintenance facility. And then just to kind of give you an idea, if you can see, that's essentially how much of the stand is going to be above ground. So pretty substantial lighting project we have going on out there, a little bit more than just mounting some lights to the concrete. And then this is just kind of a picture of that rebar structure once they have the concrete around it. And so, again, just wanted to kind of give you an idea as to the magnitude of the lighting that we're doing out there. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions about the project. Okay.
Any questions?
All right.
Thank you. Moving on to our long-range plan. Larry?
Sure, just a word about a few projects that are going on. In terms of the streetcar planning being done under the Tiger II grant, really no deliverables to provide this month. There's about 6 different deliverables that are underway, and a couple of those should be done in this next month or so. And the maps office actually had a public meeting a few weeks back. A lot of public comment was received at that meeting. It wasn't Cotpa's meeting, but it was definitely a valuable kind of meeting to the overall process. In terms of the transit system analysis, Cotpa has received that final report from the consultants, but is reviewing that, trying to look at the recommendations, and to some extent run what you might consider to be time tests on the recommendations, see if those clock face 1-hour headways can really be achieved, and basically get some good background on that. One thing that's in many respects helping to implement the Cotpa fixed guideway study is what ACOG is doing with that commuter corridor study. They had about 8 different meetings in July in 4 different cities with different stakeholders, and we had a chance to see 3 or 4 of those, and they really have done a good job of trying to present some options and also look at that longer range idea of how to fund transit. So some dialogue there. There won't really be public meetings about, say, route options until much later in the fall, but they call it a commuter corridor study. The fixed guideway study was really recommending commuter rail to those various suburbs. That may or may not be the final recommendation of this study, but it was definitely the next really important step. Same sort of study that we were doing at Cotpa for downtown streetcar with the alternatives analysis a couple of years ago. And then the final thing is, last time we had a little chuckle about Cotpa's scorecard, transit's scorecard in the state, getting the D- in terms of infrastructure. And even though we said we were in good company, probably to kind of clarify what that study, hardly any infrastructure in the state got better than a C plus. I think maybe airports did, But really, they weren't trying to say that transit service was bad. What they were really trying to say is that, in our state, because the bus systems really are so small, trying to do a good job of what they have, there's just not enough. They weren't trying to say in that kind of report that we didn't have enough buses or that buses weren't being maintained. They're just saying that how are you going to pay for the cost of replacing them? And I think they were making comments about things like the route side amenities, bus stops, sidewalks, and that sort of thing. Well, this fall, when the Academy of, State Coals does their little 2 or 3 day workshop on transportation infrastructure, this year there'll definitely be some people from the transit community there to try to make sure that transit isn't sort of left out or minimized or not really heard from. So enough said about that. Thank you for...
Actually, Larry, I have some questions about that.
Yes.
I had the privilege of being able to attend one of the Oklahoma Academy fall workshop several years ago, and about state revenues, specifically sales tax, and it was extremely valuable. And I'm wondering, I see in your report that we collaborated with Alliance for Public Transportation on an issue paper. Have we been requested, or have we prepared our own issue paper?
We haven't prepared our own, but yeah, we certainly help them, and that's going to be one of the articles that they read. Mm-hmm. And so no, we haven't.
Do we feel like the Alliance is taking a tact that will be helpful? I mean, obviously they'll be supportive of transit, but are there issues that we need to get out on the table? The way we fund buses, the federal requirement about... And I ask this question because the Oklahoma Academy has been very successful in the past at sponsoring legislation that can provide support to whatever issue that they're... And so I want to be sure that we're getting whatever we can on the table, not just whatever we're asked for.
We can certainly take some additional steps. you know, a lot of times it's great when another organization, a nonprofit,
Sure.
sort of takes on that role, you know, because obviously we're in this industry, you know, it might sort of look self-serving, you know, but yet we can provide a lot of good information, good resources, and kind of be present at the table when those
Right.
discussions go on.
Right.
But we can-
I would just say, let's not be shy. And then my other question was, who will be attending from, will Larry go? Will you go, Rick? Have we decided that, or?
Hadn't really discussed that yet, but,
Okay.
you know, if there's transit being discussed, we'll have a presence.
Well, Larry, have you done this before? Have you done one of the Oklahoma Academies?
No.
Okay. The way it works is that they break up into small groups, and each group has a discussion and brings things to the table. So it's one of those deals where you kind of want to be in as many group conversations as you can, so.
I know that we
Point
have a
that
slot, I don't know, and I know that there's one or two from APT coming, but, you know, we'll have to
Yeah.
see what we can do to,
It may be even something that some of the trustees would be interested in. It is a significant time commitment. It's a couple of days, and it really is a couple of days because you work through the night. It's like being in college and having an exam the next day. So
When and where is it this year?
well, it's actually going to be held in Norman. My understanding is a couple hundred people will be at this sort of thing. They sort of do it by application, you know, and yet it could very well be that if the Cotpa Trust has this much interest that
we may
they
be
make
able
more
to swing
space.
some more invitations.
Yeah. You might think of this as a think tank, but the thing is that these are people who come from across the state with their perspective, and they represent that. So it's just really a large group of citizens. If it was a think tank, it'd be like a big fish bowl with a lot of different types of fish swimming around. Okay. So, that's it.
Thanks, Larry.
Larry, it may really be a question for Rick. One, will Cotpa present an opinion with respect to the recommendations as it relates to the streetcar? I mean, what will our role be?
As staff, we've been following closely, and we've been making comments as we go along. Mostly I've been sitting and watching at the meetings, and it's interesting how this process has evolved. We were not necessarily supportive of all the ideas that came up early, but as more refinements have been made and more investigative work has been done, it's actually coming back to something that we think is doable. There were a couple of concerns that we had. Early on, they were not focusing on making a connection to the transit center, and we thought that was very critical.
Yes.
At the last subcommittee meeting where they actually did come to a consensus of at least a backbone as to what the route might look like, and from the public input that they received through this process, there were three areas that were a principal discussion through this process. One of them was the transit center. That scored very high from the public input, which was pleasing to us because we were certainly going to focus in that direction. Number two was an interest to make an automobile alley connection in some way. The third one was the connection to the park, and how important was that? Early on, it was very important. As they went through the process and things changed, like primarily the boulevard and the timing of the boulevard being moved out from 14 to perhaps 16, and I don't want to quote those days as being official because that's not our area, but knowing that it has been moved out and recognizing that the streetcar was targeted to be on stream by 2017, the feeling was maybe that's a phase 2 connection, particularly as the park initially begins with something along the boulevard, but not the full development of the North Park, and that we could then come back in phase 2 of the streetcar and make those connections a more direct connection. So I would say at this point in time, as a staff position, we're comfortable with the direction that it's going. I think people still that are unfamiliar with a process like that, even when the recommendation comes to City Council as towards a route, That's not a final route. What that is, again, I think of it as a backbone and something to build from, because when you get into the preliminary engineering phases, that's when you really dig a little deeper and understand what's under the street, and you look at the dynamics of the turns, and is there sufficient turning radius, and what are the problems of trying to make a left or right turn in relationship to the other traffic patterns. Those things will come to the forefront and perhaps force a relocation of the design. But I think generally to say the connection points from the very first days when we were doing our Let's Talk Transit initiatives and public participation meetings back in 2010, connecting to Bricktown, connecting to things like the convention center, connecting to the Midtown area, not necessarily St. Anthony Hospital, but that area. And of course, it's developed a lot since we got started, what is now, almost 3.5 years ago. Those are still key components of the system that's being designed, and as a staff, we're comfortable with that.
Well, I can anticipate that at least some members of the council would certainly welcome your input
and we're more than willing to give it. It was just, again, it probably would have been more obvious if we would have felt it was going in the wrong direction.
I see.
But we are comfortable with where it's headed now. It really still, and it ultimately, as a city council member, you put on that hat now, you're going to be making that decision. And I think there's two critical components as we go through this, and particularly with our experience in working through the alternatives analysis that we did when we were looking for additional federal money to support it, and that is ridership and economic development. Those are the two big things that get talked about a lot. They're not mutually exclusive, but you have to recognize there is something of a balance there, and if you go heavy on one, you could be giving up on the other one. And I think ultimately that's, as they went through these evaluation criteria and established what was important, we were following that very closely, because ultimately that is going to have an impact. And I think right now there's a heavy focus on economic development side. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but as we went through our initial AA process, one of the things that hurt us from a federal funding standpoint is their heavy focus at the time when we went through on ridership. And streetcars don't carry ridership like a commuter line might, or a light rail line, because they're a totally different design. That's irrelevant when you're all going after the same pot of money and the federal government says ridership is a key. I think now, under the new transportation bill that's out there, some of those criteria have changed, and things like economic development, land use, things like sustainability, those buzzwords now carry a little bit more weight than did just a pure focus on ridership. But that's something ultimately that from a council policy standpoint you need to look at, and what is the balance between those. And I think they're still striving to have that. I think right now it's a little heavy on the economic development side, but that's okay if that's what we want.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on into the parking system report. Debbie's not here, so Rick's going to make that.
Yeah, we wish Debbie well. She's undergoing a medical test today, so we hope that goes well. There's really not much to say. I mean, it's just amazing. Now our occupancy is 118%. To the credit of the folks from Republic and working with Debbie, I mean, the challenge is we're working hard to try to meet the needs of the downtown parkers, balancing people. They've been very, I would say, generally good to work with. Republic has to deal with some of the harsh words more than we, but it continues to be a challenge. We can't get our new garage built any too fast. There are some other, we do have Rick Dowell's building a garage up there on 4th Street between Harvey and Hudson. We also know that there's some other...
How many spaces is the Dow garage?
300, I believe. And we have been made aware that there may be some other announcements relative to some parking that'll be coming on board. The problem is there's so much pent-up demand right now that what is coming on board is going to be gobbled up right away. So, we do have a letter of interest for architects engineers primarily to take a look at that proposed Bricktown garage and its impact on the potential rail connections coming in from the east. Again, we watch very carefully what's going on with the private sector so that we don't overload ourselves with parking garages, because it is a competitive market. But recognizing that there is this continuing demand downtown, that's something that we're also having to balance. And of course, we've had that conversation as to how do we position ourselves not only to function today and to meet the immediate demand, but the long-term future demand that we know is coming, particularly with a convention center and a potential hotel.
Okay, any other questions about the parking system? If not, marketing and customer relations, Michael?
Good morning. I wanted to show you a piece of this AVL project that we have currently still in development. This is at the Transit Center, and if you'll recall, in the Transit Center there's a customer service booth, and this is one of the main wayside signs that we have down there. And so this will provide, very much like what you find in airports or other transportation areas, an expected time in which your next bus is coming. We're still working out a few kinks, but this one is working quite well, and we've had quite a bit of attention already, passengers posting it on social media and it getting circulated. So that's all positive as it's showing kind of a forward thought in our system and kind of a new face for us. And that's all there was to show. I just wanted to make you aware of that. And the green bar at the bottom does allow us to put messaging. It can scroll, and it has a couple of different features that we can use that to just make sure that messages are out there. One primary goal that we're hoping this will do is to decrease the number of people that walk up to the customer service booth and ask, when's the next whatever bus coming here? So only time will tell, but we hope that it will at least impact it. We don't have any high expectations that it'll just totally drop off. But again, it's going to be a very useful tool, and we think that those who are looking at making a switch of using or at least trying public transportation will see these new tools as a way and empower them into making their decision to give it a try. One of the other things that we are working on is a campaign, a marketing campaign, and we plan to show you that this morning, but unfortunately technology did not work in our favor. And I will be sending out at least links to all of you so that you can access that and you can review that. It's currently scheduled to go on the air with all of our major local TV stations starting on Monday. And we'll have, I believe, about an 8 or 9 week run. And this will all tie into various other media, such as outdoor digital boards, and also radio, and then some digital online, including Pandora and some of those streaming radio stations. It was very exciting to do. It's a lot of fun. And when you see that, you may recognize a few people. We have a bus operator. We have city employees. Some of their spouses and children participated. So we're very appreciative of all of their efforts, and I think they had a really good time also. Finally, just wanted to remind you that we'll be coming up on a Free Fare Friday in a couple of weeks. So far, things have gone extremely well, and that we continue to see it exceed our even daily average ridership on those days. And we continue to receive quite a bit of media coverage. So we're very pleased with that. And we hope that that continues and trends, and that people are asking questions, and we're seeing that reflected in the number of phone calls that we receive as well at our call center. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Is this updated just automatically?
Yes. So it's tied into all of that AVL real-time technology that we're placing on our buses, and so it'll receive that feed directly. And we have 5 pilot locations at actual bus stops. And they're a little more enhanced bus stops, so that those that either have extreme high on and off boardings and lightings, or that they have multiple routes converging at that one stop. They share a stop, basically. And so that it doesn't look like that. It's a little more less refined looking, but it's a very practical tool for displaying several different bus routes that are coming into that area. And I can include I tried taking pictures of it, and they actually, they pulsate the lights. And so it just totally blurs out. You can't actually get a picture of it.
So tell us where they might be so we could try to go by.
We have one along Route 23. That's one of the ones that have the most, what we'd say, lines that are converging at that one spot. I think it's 23rd and Flynn, or right around the...
OCU?
Yes, it's just a little up from that, I think, or further west than that. We also have one along out there by, I think it was the new outlet mall area. There's one that is located out there. I don't remember the exact address. There's 5 total. We had to move a few because locating viable spots to bring electricity to the shelter made it very cost prohibitive in some areas, some in excess of $30,000 just for one location. So we mixed some of those just because of the cost.
Is there potential for there to be solar for some of these?
We looked into that, and the issue with that is that the technology to support these requires, because it's a constant update, a very large power source, and there's not quite enough reserve in those to continually power the modem that it's required to constantly update everything, and also to just store enough in case there is no sun.
Are they pretty weather resistant?
Yes, they're very heavy duty. These here that are in the transit center look very much like a TV. In fact, they are a TV, just much more enhanced. But these are very heavy duty, very similar to what you would find in other agencies around the country. It's the name of the company is Data Display, and they're one of the leading manufacturers for this type of technology.
We'll get you the addresses of those other ones, because I know that there is one on the south, and
Yes,
I think
there
it's
is
Walker, but I've driven
Walker's
by
right.
it.
Yeah,
Is
you're
it
right.
Walker, yeah, thought so. So we'll get you those addresses so you can find them.
This is exciting. We're up.
We're barreling headlong into the 90s.
Technology it's a very time-consuming thing to get moving, and unfortunately it's not just that flip of a switch, but once it does start coming together, it is very exciting. And I think our passengers and those again who are on the fence and just need that slight nudge, I think this might be a very good tool for empowering them to use the service.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. The Oklahoma River Cruises report, Jeannie?
Good morning. Oh, yes, rain is a wonderful thing until it comes down in such a deluge that, and in fact, we had to cancel service all of last weekend due to the rain and a release of water from Lake Overholser, which was overfull, and the volume of debris in the river. I drove over it that Friday morning, and it was just unbelievable, the amount of debris floating. Now, the Public Works cleanup crew came out, started out on Monday, and by Wednesday, everything was cleaned up, and it looked really good. So we're really, really happy with the service that we got there. Wanted to just update you on our, if I can figure out how to do this. You send it back one. On our maintenance building. This is a shot of the north side of the building. The exterior stairs have been painted. We chose a light color for those stairs so that they would blend into the building. Grading of the landscaping around, they'll be laying sod here pretty soon to take care of that. This is the interior. We chose a black for the interior stairs to hide some of the grease and dirt that might get on them during times when we're doing maintenance. Up at the top of the stairs, there is the mezzanine. It has a railing, a safety railing, and it has a concrete floor, so you can store heavy equipment up there if necessary. I'll point out that the stairway on the mezzanine, where it doesn't quite meet the top of the mezzanine in the middle there, that's the deck level of the river cruiser when it's in there. Any one of those railing sets can be removed to allow easy access onto and off of the river cruiser while it's in maintenance. This is the south side of the building. This will be the employee parking area. It will be fenced to allow security for the vehicles. Many of these people arrive 10 o'clock, 10:30 in the morning, and they don't get back to their cars till 6:30 or 7 o'clock at night, sometimes later. And so it became necessary to enclose that with some fencing to secure those vehicles. This is facing west. This is the main bay door where the river cruiser will be backed into the building. All this concrete work is completely done, and we're very happy with all the space we have there to maneuver the boat into the building. This is a shot of the air conditioning compressors being placed. There are 2 4-ton compressors, one at either end of the building. This is significant in that once these are up and running, they can then seal the building, have it climate controlled, and then proceed with all the cabinetry and finishing of the ceiling tiles and so forth. This is the interior.
Jeannie, is there some security for those air conditioning units?
Yes, that entire area is behind a fence.
Okay.
And then we're also acquiring some security cages to double secure those AC units. The photo on the left is the workroom, and that's where the cabinetry will go, and a sink for the crews. They're preparing the vessel for service that day. And then, of course, to the right is the shower area and the restroom with all the fixtures. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
No questions? Well, thank you, Jeannie. Do we have a motion then to receive our program reports?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Items from the trustees. Start with Kay.
I have no items.
Just two short items. Number one, those of you who visited Union Station a few weeks ago know how torn up we had it. Yesterday, we poured the driveway in front, the circular drive in front of the building, and then they have poured a small patch on the south side of the building, and they'll continue to do the concrete pour work. However, starting next week, then we're going to get in and just tear up the west side of the building in the parking lot there. So for a short period of time, if you come down to visit us, parking will be on the street or else to that lot just on the west side of Hudson, which is a lot that we own. So still going to be a little bit of a challenge when you get down there, but at least we're starting to see things come back together now. We've got our lines in. They will be doing some drainage work on the west side of the building, so we will be back digging up on that side and then doing the grading so that we get the proper flow and drainage that we need. Once we complete all these, then we'll get back in and do some of the structural rehabilitation that's necessary to do some of the other exterior finish work, some painting and things like that. And then once all of that is completed and hopefully we've still got some money left over, then we'll do some of the cosmetic things on the inside of the building. But I wanted to make sure that structurally it was watertight, B, it was structurally sound. With our new parking lots, we are putting in new lighting, however, new security lighting on the exterior of the building as well. So some major facelifts that you'll appreciate because you've seen it before, you'll see the after. Oh, and one other item, and that is we are going to send out a notice to you, but we are going to have to move the October meeting from the first Friday to perhaps the second Friday, assuming we can get a quorum. That week is the week that APTA has their annual meeting, and it's going to run Monday through Wednesday. So because of the fact that some of us will be out of the office the better part of that week, I'd like to shift it a week if we could. But we'll get a notice out, and then we'll do a check with all of you to see if it fits your calendars.
Okay. If there's no other business, then we're adjourned. Thank you all.